Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's fourth space. Thanks for joining us for today's event, Crafting Commons, Material, Making, and Meditate. Now, we'd like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Choudhary, Montreal. And we respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions and projects, things in development across the university. We're running today's event as a live stream both to YouTube and to Zoom. So those of you joining us on Zoom, we welcome your comments or questions via the chat. And for those of you here in the space, if you have any comments or questions, just raise your hand and we'll run a microphone over to you so that everyone can hear. Okay. With that, it's very much my pleasure to hand the microphone over to our host and moderator for this morning, PhD candidate and Concordia public scholar, Pramila Choudhary. Good morning.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning. It's good morning and good afternoon, good evening, because all the people joining from different parts of the world, and we are really privileged to have you all. A very warm welcome to Crafting Commons, and we are joining today from different parts of the world. As I mentioned, it's 10 a.m. in Canada, Montreal, 3 p.m. in the UK, Nottingham, and 8:30 p.m. in various parts of India where all the people are joining on the panel as well. They might be, I'm not sure about Juhi, she's been traveling, but might be in Gujarat, Delhi, Jaipur, and Bangalore. We all are connected through shared interest in craft practices, material culture, community, and making by hands. Many of my friends know this story already, but many of you might not. So I grew up on a farm where mountains and a river were part of my daily life. At the same time, every summer I spent nearly 2 months with my grandmother Anchi Devi in the Thar desert of western Rajasthan, India, whom we lovingly called Ma. She cared for livestock, grew her own food, built her own home using local materials, and spun yarns in the afternoons. This wasn't described as a sustainability at that time, and it was simply a way of life. Today, it almost sounds like a speculative world. Over the last decade, I saw these practices slowly disappear. Natural fiber-based local textiles were replaced by fossil fuel-based materials. Handmade practices were replaced by plastics and other non-natural materials. And intergenerational knowledge, once passed on through oral tradition, began to break. So with this background, hi, my name is Pramila Choudhary, and I'm an interdisciplinary designer, a textile artist, and researcher. Currently a PhD candidate and public scholar at the Concordia University, Montreal. Today's Public Scholar Spotlight event, Crafting Commons, is co-created with all our collaborators and organizing teams, Swaparnika, Bala Swaminathan, Nadia Bunyan, Megha Chauhan, who's joining us online from Nottingham, and Eleanor Dufilet, who have made this gathering possible, as well as everyone joining online and in person. We are really grateful to have you all. As the Concordia's Public Scholar Program, it's a unique initiative that supports PhD candidates and researchers in sharing their work beyond academia through public dialogues, creative practices, and community engagement practices. As part of this program, today Public Scholar Spotlight event has been developed in collaboration with wonderful team at Fourth Space, with the generous support from Southern Asian Studies in the Department of Religion and Culture Studies at Concordia, Growing Art nonprofit, Project Handstitch, and the Textile and Materiality Cluster at the Milieu Institute. Today we gather for Crafting Commons, a one-day symposium bringing together artists, researchers, educators, and community members across the world, as I mentioned, to share, learn, and think together about craft and material practices. A quick overview for the day. We will begin with 5-minute lightning presentation, all the panel members who are joining here in person and others who are online, followed by an open conversation for next hour, and then we break for a lunch. It will be half an hour, and after lunch from 1:30 to 2:30, we will move into artist showcase. You can see the whole space is curated with wonderful artists, and we are really grateful to have them, which is co-curated by Eleanor Dofatel, who will be moderated that section of the day. And we will transition into the experiential hands-on workshop, which many of you are waiting towards the end of the day, which is co-curated with Growing Arc team. Today, it's represented by Tara James, along with Vanessa Rendell and Genevieve Moisen. This section will be moderated by Nadia Bunyan from 2:30 to 5 p.m. That is your chance to touch and feel all the materials, talk to each other, meet everyone, and I guess also that will connect with what all we are going to share today on the screen. From visually, you can see here in the place, touch and feel, and then with the materials. These workshops will be focused on working with natural fibers, including sheep wool, hand carding, hand spinning with both spinning wheels and hand spindles. We will be breaking some flax and using hackling and hand spinning to spin some linen yarn, and we will be doing solar dyeing jars because it's right now really cold out here and we have a lot of snow, so making jars would be a lot of fun. With this, we open the symposium, and thank you all for being here. We are delighted to begin. With this, I will hand over to Swaparnika, who will be our first panelist for the day in person. For all the panelists who are presenting today, we will start with a short bio. You can introduce yourself, and then we take over your presentations. If there is anything in any point of time, raise your hand and we will be happy to help you, both online and in person. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pramila. This has been put together beautifully. I'm very much looking forward to seeing all the different aspects of the workshop today. My name is Swaparnika Balaswaminathan. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Religions and Cultures at Concordia University. I'm also an anthropologist, so the way in which I engage with craft is really through artisans. I work with artisans who make bronzes and write about them. So we can start the slides. All right, next one. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to be talking about South Indian bronze casting, or South Indian bronzes, which you see in the images over there. I work with a community of sculptors who right now live in this town called Swamimalai in the south of India. They make these sculptures that are religious objects. The art itself, this specific kind of sculpture, has been dated to around the 8th century, but it's probably older than that. These are Hindu idols that are kept in temples and worshipped as processional deities. You see that in the image on the right. However, at some point of time, they also became museum objects. And this is a connection with soil that is going to persist throughout this presentation, in which I'm going to be talking about how soil kind of mediates the relationship between the artisans and these bronzes. In around the 16th century, there were political conflicts, unrest, which resulted in these bronzes being buried for their safety. But the unrest lasted too long, and it was only during the colonial period, so around the 1800s, that very accidentally they started getting excavated during infrastructure and construction projects that were being done during that period. And so you have these colonial officers and local workers who are digging up to build houses and bridges and whatnot, and then these bronzes are like emerging out of it, covered in soil and oxidized by what's in the soil. So some of them were returned to temples, but many others ended up in museums, and that's why we see these in museums. So when it comes to the process itself, it's the lost wax method or the sir perdu method. This is where a wax model is made, and then this is covered in clay, so once again, soil, with a couple of outlets. This is then heated. The clay is heated, the wax melts through the outlets, and the clay becomes a terracotta mold. The terracotta mold is buried with the outlets facing up, so now they've become inlets. Molten metal, usually a combination of copper, zinc, tin, are poured into it. This is cooled, the mold is broken, and then the sculpture that emerges out of it is finished with handwork. It's a unique process because at every stage, part of the previous model is broken for the new shape to take form. And this means through the process, you only end up making one sculpture. You can't really reuse the mold to make more. The clay is particularly important for this, the quality of the clay. In fact, the people that I work with in Swamimalai claim that they moved to this village around the 1600s because they found the quality of clay by the banks of the river Kaveri that flows by this village to be of such exceptional quality that that's what permitted them to make beautiful sculptures. There is also a symbolic importance to this mold process. The mold itself in Tamil is called karu, which means embryo. And so there is this reproductive allegory that is put into this, although almost all the sculptors are men. There is one woman sculptor in Swamimalai right now, and perhaps in all of history. So apart from this religious and museum importance, now bronzes are also important in a nationalistic and cultural way. When India got its independence in 1947, it decided it needed to reestablish links with pre-colonial history and heritage. And bronzes were one of the art forms that was chosen to kind of showcase this link. It was a dying art at that point, and the government intervened to revive it by starting a sculpture school and providing help for the marketing of these sculptures. And at that point, they also became handicrafts. So this kind of government intervention, helpful, or at least supposed to be helpful, has introduced technological changes and has acknowledged economic changes, which has caused some disruptions, I think, in the relationship that artisans have with soil. So I'm going to give two examples of processes in which we can see a kind of reciprocal, respectful relationship that artisans have with soil, one of which still continues and another one which is being disrupted. So every 6 to 9 months, workshops are cleaned because of the final process where the finishing of the bronze means like you're scraping out parts of the metal. There are metal scraps and pieces everywhere. And so the mud of the workshop grounds are washed and the detritus is collected, it is melted to be reused. So in that sense, this is a craft that doesn't really leave much waste behind. It doesn't really leave, for archaeologists, evidence behind. And so one of the issues has been that it's very difficult to find old workshops because there isn't really archaeological remnants that are left. There's nothing that's really left behind. You have the soil that is cleaned up and left as it is. However, the disruption that I mentioned comes from the clay that the sculptors had said is an integral component of the molding. So this clay that needs to be collected from the river bed is now not being done anymore because the sculptors are worried that they will get arrested for sand theft. Sand theft is a huge illegal business in India and other parts of the world. Sand is a difficult commodity to get. It's a difficult resource to get, and now it's a commodity for construction, for the creation of concrete. I read that it takes 20,000 years to create sand, and so in many ways it's a depleting resource. And so now, because sand theft is so prevalent, sculptors are being accused of stealing sand when, it is this sort of ancestral relationship, a respectful relationship they've had with the sand for a very long time, and is the very reason why they even settled in this place. So this clay has really created a sense of belonging for these sculptors that is now being taken away. So sculptors have now resorted to using gypsum plaster or plaster of Paris, which in some ways, gypsum still comes from the soil. It's a natural resource, but it is mined. And so there is a distance that's created between sculptors and the clay that is essential for their craft. And so you now have this, government which is supposed to aid in the revival, which is supposed to keep things traditional, that is now creating these barriers between sculptors and the land in which they're living in. So I think that's enough time, but yeah, I'm gonna end with that.
Wow. Madan Meena is the next. Yeah, they're putting the slides. We have next speaker online, Mr. Madan Meena. Yeah.
Yeah. So namaste from India. So here one of my recent project, which I just finished last year, which is a Thar Desert Pottery project, is featured. But before this, I did another museum almost 15 years ago, which was about brooms from Rajasthan. And all these brooms which are used by the communities in the desert, they're all made from variety of grasses that are found locally. So that was one exhibition which was curated at the Anna Jharna, the Thar Desert Museum of Rajasthan, which is near Jodhpur, where we collected some 160 varieties of broom used by the local communities. Not the broom which are used in the urban spaces, but the broom which were used by the local communities in the desert. Now over here, as you see in the picture, this is a botanical retreat which has come up last 4 years. The founder, Sapna Bhatia, she is very much interested in the plants of the desert. So the idea came up to also have an experience of desert pottery, which is very rich, because pottery becomes very important in Rajasthan desert because water is very important for the desert, and there is a scarcity of water that we understand in the desert. Pot could only be made with the clay, and clay is only found where there is water. You can't make pot with the sand that you see in the desert. But in spite of having this scarcity, you'll see a large variety of pottery which has been practiced by various communities in western desert of this part of Rajasthan. So we collected some 800 varieties of pottery from border districts of Rajasthan, some 5 districts of Rajasthan, and curated this exhibition for Kanir retreat. So it connects the plant biodiversity, the ecology of the desert, and the pottery tradition that has existed. Pottery traditions means not just the utility of the pottery, but there are various aspects of pottery which are attached with this pottery. There is a traditional patronage, there is a faith and belief system, there are various rituals where the pottery becomes very important. The role of a potter in communities, in other communities, the dependency of communities on the potter, which is very important, and the knowledge behind this pottery. So you see, for example, in this picture, just from the border neighboring to Pakistan, the potter is over here, who's called Moila Kumar, and they have a tradition of doing very decorative pottery that we do not see in any other parts of Rajasthan. And these pottery pieces just resembles to the Indus Valley civilization pottery that we see going back to 3000th century BC, like that. And there is still a traditional patronage system that exists where every year they have to supply 2 pairs of 16 kinds of varieties of pottery pieces to their patrons, means their jajmans. And these jajmans or these patrons are in the villages basically. And then on the marriage, the potter has an important role of giving those pots to the family where the marriage is happening, and where the sacred 7 rounds around the fire are taken. So there also we have a ritual called chak bhat. So there the pottery becomes very important. The marriage cannot happen without the potter's role. So you have to see that there is a very social importance of a potter in communities' lives, and not just as a part of making pottery for the functional use, but also for the religious and cultural functioning of the potter. So that is one thing. Then if we go to the utility aspect of this, then we see that the pottery pieces in this part of Rajasthan are still being used for cooking food, whereas other places you'll see that a lot of metal utensils has come in, but here still the terracotta articles, the terracotta cookwares are used. Then for the storage, for skimming butter, for making buttermilk, for keeping water, storing water, and even for carrying water to fields, from very large pot which can hold 500 liters of water to a very small bottles which can hold half liters of water. So varieties of water pots exist over here, even to keep a tobacco, things like tobacco, to keep spices, to keep salt, all those kinds, and to store food also for a longer duration. So these pottery articles are used for varieties of purposes over here. So we did this exhibition for Kanir, which is still there. It will remain as a permanent exhibition for some time. And this has been all done by using the local material over there. So you see this, it's a mud structure. It has been plastered with mud, and the local woman, in the previous image that you've seen, the local woman has made this exhibition entirely after the local material from that part of this Kanir retreat. And it showcases some 40% of the collection. The collection is of some 800 pieces, but right now it's just showing 300 to 350 pieces of the pottery pieces. And another thing that we observe in this is the linguistic diversity of these pottery pieces, because language changes in Rajasthan after every 25 kilometers. So when I'm talking of 5 districts from Western Rajasthan in India, which is then if you go from one place to another, the same pot or the same utility has different changes in the names also. So we end up collecting hundreds of names of pottery from this part of this Rajasthan. So that's another important richness of attaching pottery with the linguistic diversity of this region, and definitely the biodiversity. Now coming to the shapes, design and material of the pot, some are pink, some are white, some are red. So this depends entirely on the type of clay which is found locally. So the clay decides the nature of the pottery, and definitely the technique of making the pottery is also very important, because firing also, some firings happen at 700, some happens till 900-degree temperature. So that also decides the nature of the pottery, and then the kind of a decoration over the pottery. Even the decorations can tell you that from which region the pottery comes from. And even the size of the pot or the clay also tells you that from which part of this Western Rajasthan the pottery has come from. In this exhibition, there are some old pots as old as 100 years to 150 years, and there are new pieces which are still being made by the potter communities in the desert. So this is what I wanted to share, that pottery is very important. It's just not as a utility article, but also as a socio-cultural importance of the potter communities in the society's lives. Thank you.
So hello, everyone. My name is Rachel McHenry. I'm a textile designer, researcher, and educator, working primarily with craft, and I'm an assistant professor in fashion at Toronto Metropolitan University in Toronto, in Canada. And I'm going to share with you a few different aspects of my practice and research. This first slide focuses on the work I do through Handwork Studio, which is a shared initiative with my design colleague, Munira Amin. And through our studio practice, we work with long-term relationships with communities around the world to sustain traditional skills and knowledge. And we're also very interested in researching bioregional materials, things such as plant dyes and local fibers, traditional techniques, and developing this research into contemporary design collections. We also share this research both with the communities we work with and with various ways of working with students as well. And we've worked on projects with UNESCO and the Government of Canada and the Government of Peru, as well as working in other parts of the world in South Asia. So we have a number of ongoing projects, including working with printers and dyers, excuse me, in traditional Ajrak printing communities along the banks of the River Indus in Sindh, Pakistan. And in these communities, a lot of the traditional knowledge around indigo dyeing and carving of blocks was being lost with a rush for sort of modernization and many young people leaving for work to go to the cities. And when we started working with these communities, a lot of the traditions were quite fragile. And the local people didn't feel they had value or importance. And one thing we've seen through the time period that we've worked with these families is a deepening of knowledge and a deepening of interest in retaining that knowledge within the communities. So Ajrak is a traditional process, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, that works with layers of block printing, applying both resists and mordants, and then layers of natural dyeing. Excuse me. And in the work we are developing, we are taking these traditions and working with the printers to develop more contemporary expressions where we're interested in working with rhythm and geometry, a lot of the traditional aspects of the Ajrak system, to apply them to a more contemporary design aesthetic. Another ongoing project is a collaboration in Assam, India with Seven Weaves. And Seven Weaves is an initiative that's based within the forest-dependent communities. These are Rabha communities. It's an indigenous group in northeastern India. And the communities focus on rearing, spinning, and weaving eri silk, which is a semi-wild silk, different from the mulberry silk that you might be familiar with, to produce a climate-beneficial textile. And the communities are also working to support biodiversity and to maintain traditional craft and ecological knowledge. So the Seven Weaves project is focused on creating a local production system from the soil all the way through to the textile and the garment, where all of the raw materials, the expertise, and the skill comes from the indigenous communities through their relationship with the forest. The communities are also involved in other aspects of biodiversity preservation. For example, they're involved in tracking and recording animal and bird species, and they work with the local university as indigenous citizen scientists to help understand and preserve the local ecosystem. I've been supporting this project through assisting with developing textile design collections. And the project is very interested in connecting with markets outside of India as well as within India. And we're looking at aiming those connections at the slow fashion movement, at textile-based brands and designers, and at the high end of this fashion spectrum. So eri is a wild silk, and we're working with natural dyes. It's completely biodegradable at the end of life and made with indigenous know-how through cooperative community-based systems. And over the past few years, we've been developing new ranges of textiles. The communities decided they didn't want to share their traditional motifs in a commercial context. And so it was a community decision to focus on the development of new design collections. And we've been showing those collections in Paris at Première Vision, which is a large international textile trade show for the fashion industry. And there's a special section at Première Vision called Maisons d'Exception, where they focus on craft and craft traditions. So we've been showcasing the work there. And then linked to these two areas of research and practice is my work as an educator. And this has focused on developing opportunities for land-based learning in fashion at Toronto Metropolitan University. And over the last few years, we've developed a natural dye garden as a research collaboration with the university's rooftop urban farm. And that's located on top of one of it's on top of the engineering building. It's a very large space. And the farm primarily is focused on growing food that is made available to students. And the farm also links with various social justice organizations in the center of the city, like the Indigenous Women and Children's Center, to provide free food. And we have been developing this research through the Urban Farms team of farmers and linking it to a studio dye course. So in this course, students spend the first few weeks of the fall at the rooftop farm, learning about organic farming, regenerative farming practices, harvesting, dye plant preparation, and actually carrying out solar dyeing on the rooftop. And working with the team at the Urban Farm, we've been able to plant a variety of dye plants that come from different parts of the world, really reflecting the broad diversity of students that we have at the university. And we've been able to test out how these plants will grow here in Canada and see which are suitable for use as dye materials. So students have the chance to experience the garden, which is a wonderful experience, and to take part in hands-on learning. And I also have the opportunity to share my research with my students and to pass my knowledge forward to young fashion designers who are very interested in focusing on sustainable approaches to fashion. And finally, another element of this research collaboration is our flax research project, which is also part of the dye garden research. And this is a demonstration research project where we are proposing that flax could once again be grown here in this region of Canada and potentially processed from fiber to fabric in a local supply chain for fashion and design. And I've been assisted in this project by two wonderful research assistants, Mika and Emma, who have worked side by side with me on the rooftop in all weathers, harvesting and learning how to process the fibers. And over the last few months, we've also been learning how to spin and to create small textile swatches out of our urban-grown flax harvest. So it's been a very exciting process for the students, and we've been able to share the research through an exhibition that's currently on in Toronto through Design TO, which is a citywide design event. We'll also be sharing our research at the Landmade event at the university, taking place March 6th and 7th. So we're hoping through these various research education projects to help students see the potential for local production and for various sustainable approaches for fashion. Thank you.
Namaste to all of you. It's really interesting, Rachel, that you started with talking about Ajrak. So I'm talking to you from a space which is just a kilometer away from Ajrakpur in Gujarat, India, which used to be a part of the larger Sindh space, and Pakistan, Kutch were all one at one point of time. But today I'm here as a craft and social design professional. What I really do and have been doing for the last 15 odd years is working with Indigenous craft communities to look at their processes, their material culture, almost their stories and their histories, which have been lost in the aspect of the commodification of craft that has happened through industrialization. And one of the projects that I'm going to talk to you about today is a very recent one, but something. Sorry, I'm also I hope you can hear me. I'm in a rural space, so electricity just keeps going off. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. So just do with dark me, but I hope you can see my presentation. Um, these are a few things that happen when you're in a rural space. So this is a project of one of the 5 indigenous varieties of cotton that grow in India. It used to grow extensively in the early 1900s, and somewhere with the independence and the partition of India, the breakup of central Bengal from India kind of started reducing the demand of this cotton. If you can see the map, I'm talking about a region called Meghalaya, which is in the northeastern part. And this is a region which is the westernmost, touching the border of Bangladesh, called Garo Hills, where we had this cotton called, the indigenous name is Kal, but it got its name Pramila because of the port from which it used to be exported by the East India Company to the UK in the early 1900s. This cotton is a very special cotton, and it can only and only grow in this part of the world. We haven't found this particular variety of cotton anywhere else in India or anywhere else in the world. It's basically what we call a long pod cotton. It's a multi-seed cotton pod, which does not really, there aren't too many cotton varieties that grow in a multi-seed format. And there used to be tons of this particular cotton fields all over Garo Hills till about the 1960s. And slowly this particular cotton started becoming unpopular. One, because they lost their trade route through Bangladesh and out. And the second was, by then, the industrialization in India, especially with the cotton industry, had grown so much that everybody was more used to getting mill-made cotton rather than looking at their own indigenous cotton. So this now grows. If you can go to the next slide. It still continues to grow because of these people. This is a community called the Songsarek community, one of the oldest indigenous tribes of the Northeast per se, and definitely of Meghalaya, who have actually continued to live in their lifestyle that they had adopted years ago. Probably the only thing that has changed is clothing. With the advent of development, they have started clothing themselves with more modern clothes. But otherwise, this is a community that completely lives away from the rest of so-called the modern society of this region. Because of their remoteness, they continue to still practice most of all of their indigenous cultural systems, which includes farming. This community was specifically a farming community, but they farmed first for themselves and then for the larger community of traders or to sell in local markets. Cotton is connected to them more from a cultural space. It's a very, very important material for a lot of their customs and rituals, starting from birth to memorials to even their death rituals. We have evidence that they did process cotton at some point of time, though there's now, when you meet the community, they have very, very little memory of if they were processing the cotton up to the cloth level. But we did manage to at least figure out that they were processing the cotton because of this hand ginning tool that we found with every woman that is in this village of about, this particular village has about 50 households. And a very, very old lady, they told us she was about 103 years old, who had a drop spindle, which she showed us that she knew how to spin. So here is where a person like me comes in. I have worked with indigenous value chains in the western part of the country, in Gujarat, with their own traditional indigenous cotton, as well as the traditional indigenous wool. And what we learned in those processes earlier was that we need these indigenous materials to survive, not only for creating some kind of USP or special cloth that you will sell in the fashion world, but actually these materials help to create ecological and maintain an ecological balance of these environments. So any of these particular indigenous varieties of plants lost to those particular regions also create imbalances. Just as if we lose even one insect species in any form of environment, it does create an ecological balance. And so for us to maintain these seeds, maintain these plants, is not only to build a craft practice or revive a craft practice or a value chain, but also for ecological balance. These people have been very innocently, actually. You've got a word called meditate in your crafting commons values, and they almost practice this particular format of cultivation called jhum cultivation as a meditative practice. Next slide. So the jhum cultivation or the slash and burn technique is one of the oldest indigenous agricultural practices that were practiced by tribals and indigenous communities across the world. It got lost in amongst most communities and most regions of the world with the coming of industrialization, the idea of mass production, monoculture, market-driven cash crops, all of these aspects completely made us forget about our indigenous practices, which were sustainable from the get-go. Nobody had to make them sustainable practices. They were sustainable from the get-go. And this community of Songsarics continue to practice this. Cotton is one of the 5 to 6 species of other crops that they grow on their fields. It's a single year cultivation crop, but it gives them food, materials for their food, for shelter, as well as clothing, which is the 3 basic human needs. It's a family practice. So everybody in the family actually contributes to the farm. They contribute to clearing the farm after the harvest. They contribute to maintaining and protecting the farm from birds, animals, etc. during the time that it's growing. And the whole family and actually the whole community comes together during the harvest time. All of it is done with the community's involvement in a very collective manner. So I used to live in Gujarat and Rajasthan, and I moved to the northeast of India in 2021, actually with a project with the wild silk that Rachel just spoke about. And it's a small world. I do know 7 leaves very well. So I learned a lot about the wild silk from Seven Weaves. And it's during that period of time that I started looking for these communities, because I'd known that there is a community of people growing this particular cotton. But in the larger so-called market of the cotton trade in India, or even amongst the communities and groups that are working specifically with indigenous cotton, there was very little knowledge about this cotton. But having gone into the region, and I knew it was in the Northeast, it was growing somewhere in Meghalaya. We started working and doing some research, and I found a few elderly people who remembered this cotton. And finally, around mid 23, I found this very elderly lady who was into farming from this region and said, yes, we used to grow this cotton, but no more. It's very little. It does not get us any money. So we've moved to other cash crops like rubber, and now we're going to look at palm oil, which are all disastrous crops to actually think of. But in the economic aspect, very, very lucrative as of today. And hence, when I got to know that there is a region and I could visit it, I made a trip in June 2024 to see these cotton farmers and see what they were doing. Were they really growing cotton? They weren't growing cotton. And we found a group that was growing it, and they will always grow it because it's connected to their cultural practices. But then the Department of Agriculture of the state got very interested in seeing how we can work further. The next slide, please. So in January, so this is June 24 to up to December 2024, we basically tried to understand the community, build a certain relationship with the community, tell them who we were, what was my background in terms of work, would we be interested in working with them with their cotton? Would they want something of that sort to happen? Because they've always lived by themselves, very happy, very content. So you've got to be sensitive when you work with these kind of almost vulnerable communities. You do not want to take advantage of it, nor do you want to corrupt them. So they were very open and said, you can buy our cotton and take it forward and work with it however you want. So as an experimentation, when they harvested in December of 2024, we bought about 5,000 kilos of the raw cotton from them. And we took it to the only ginning mill. There's actually no history of cotton and cotton processing or spinning in that region, but there was a ginning mill, which was set up in the 1940s, which typically was because there was the trade going on, but now it functions when it's needed. So we got the cotton, 5,000 kilos of cotton ginned, and we actually got only 2,700 kilos of lint. Because this is it's a multi-seed pod, the weight is almost equal of the fiber and the seed. From here, we actually started experimenting with hand spinning. And I got two students from the National Institute of Design, where I'm an alumni of as well, to actually join me to do the experimentation as a part of their own thesis, and try and work with seeing if this cotton can be spun. Now, this cotton being indigenous is one of the shortest fibers. It's just about 9 mm to 10 mm in length. It's rough. It's actually got a slightly woolly feel and a bounce, which does make it very sticky together. It's very, very dense fibers all bound together. To card it and to open it was also a challenge, but we worked through the process. The students really worked very hard. I was only giving my expert advice from the distance and going once in a way, but we have now managed to actually train 5 people who never knew spinning before, using the drop spindle and the spinning wheel, and have gotten yarn, which was completely not a part of the memory of the community at all. And recently in Jan 26, Smita, who you can see in the next slide on the loom, has managed to also work with it on the warp and the weft and create a sample loom. So this is where we are. These processes of building an indigenous value chain or reviving an indigenous value chain is slow. It cannot happen overnight, and we have to go as per the community's spirit and the community's method and the community's pace. We can't just bring in our tools and our techniques and think that they will adapt it. And so, having reached this level, we're very hopeful that we can bring a new life to the cloth and offer a new fiber once again to the world through this community. So thank you very much for being patient and listening to me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Juhi. We will move to Pragya's presentation now. I know we mentioned that we are tight on the time, but everything is so exciting and important at the same time. So we are not flagging 5 minutes. I hope it's fine for everyone. If any point, especially all the panelists, if you have any time-bound thing, please let me know. So we go with the Pragya now. Thank you.
Hello everyone. It's so amazing to hear these stories from different parts of the world. Um, my name is Pragya Sharma. I am a PhD student in design history at the University of Brighton, and I'm studying both the historical and social and cultural practices of hand knitting in India. I'll be speaking briefly about domestic practices of knitting as we see it in India, as a craft that one encounters on a daily basis, but is rarely spoken about, especially in forums like this. And I wanted to start with these two images, mainly because this is a familiar sight in a majority of Indian households. A ball of yarn pierced by two needles, a continuous loop of knitting, which is dropped off and picked up as and when the chance arrives. The woman sneaks in 3 to 4 hours of daily knitting in between the countless chores around the house. And so through the day, knitting is paused and continued, left midway, and then picked up again. The purpose behind knitting has majorly been to clothe an entire family, for parents, husband, children. Baby needs caps, so it had to be done. In a sense, it becomes interlinked with domestic labor. Knitting as a skill then becomes part of the larger domestic responsibilities that women shoulder within the household. Not only does these images show a work in progress, but a continuous act of making. A cap for a son, a muffler for a friend, a jumper for a brother. But rarely anything is made for the woman knitter herself. When I asked women to tell me about something they had knitted for themselves, they would be fumbling for a suitable answer. Women have mainly knitted for others, and many continue to do so. Knitting for someone close is considered a universal love language. This pair of stockings that you see on the slide were made to be worn beneath the petticoat under the sari during the winter months. With drawstrings knitted at the top, these kept the legs warm under the sari. This pair was knitted and tailored to my interviewee Suman's mother-in-law. As you can see, it gets quite wider in the middle because, as Suman mentioned, her mother-in-law had thicker thighs. You knit for someone because you cherish a person, you cherish a relationship. Most of the women, however, didn't have the products they made with them anymore, simply because they had knitted for others and not for themselves. A daughter of an interviewee also expresses this regret. She says, "Most of the things I never got to see because things were made and then given away." This transaction of hand knitted objects explains how much is just done for gifting and giving away. Having knitted a lot of items for others, women have been very generous with their time and labor. Beyond serving a purpose of clothing for winters, the broader motivation was also to make your family or kids wear the garments you knitted so that they receive praises when they step outside wearing them. As a teenager, 54-year-old Anuradha, another knitter I interviewed, had knitted several garments for her elder brother. When I probed further, she took some time to articulate the reason behind this frenetic knitting for a sibling. She responded that she did so because she wanted her brother to look good so that others would come and praise him. So much of what was being knitted was viewer centric. Who will see it and what will they think of it? This was crucial to keep this in mind before one decided what to knit in the first place. This daily act of knitting was not just working in knits and pearls and creating something, but it was also a lot of bonding, with sometimes knitting just acting as this connective tissue in enabling or linking relationships. One of my interviewees, Kajal, recounts the time in the 70s when her grandmother was part of a knitting group. She says we would go to somebody's house, sit together on the terrace, and knit and chat. In a way, it took care of our needs. For me and my grandmother, knitting was the time she would relay stories of her childhood, and so knitting became a bonding time. But a lot of women have always enjoyed solitary knitting as well. When I asked knitters how they learned to knit in the first place, in Indian households, no one teaches you how to knit, you just learn it. 79-year-old Priyamvada, another knitter, mentioned how she just does not remember how she learned to knit, but she and most of the other knitters I interviewed too remember what they made for the very first time: a scarf, clothes for dolls, and sometimes even a sweater right away. Meera Verma, another knitter, says it was more about community sharing earlier. It used to connect the women. There was sharing of ideas and patterns, and also sharing of labor. For instance, if somebody had to finish something faster, 5 people would come together. One would do the front, another knitted the back, another did the sleeves, and then someone stitched it all together. Very sweetly, an interviewee jotted down points so that she does not forget during my interview. Knitting in India thus finds itself between intergenerational learning, care, relationships, and the labor of knitting. That's it from mine.
Thank you so much, Megha. We have Kathleen, I guess, next. Yes, do you want to have the remote or I can? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pramila. It's so interesting hearing everybody's remarks and finding resonances with my own thinking and making too. I'm Kathleen Vaughn. I'm a professor of art education here at Concordia and Concordia University Research Chair in Art and Education for Sustainable and Just Futures. And I think of myself as an artist who also is very involved in community practice and thinks and works about the public pedagogies of art making. How is it that we learn from each other and from materials as we engage in making or as we engage in looking at art that somebody else has made? So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about two projects of mine that are ongoing. But to begin, I'll say that my own training back in the day was in painting, drawing, and photography, and those are still artist tools that I enjoy very much. But I also, adjacent and alongside everything, have been somebody who loves handwork. I have a brother who is 3 years younger, who emerged, much to my mother's surprise, as a giant baby who was way too big for everything everybody had knitted for him. And so I got all the knitted clothes for my dolls. And I thought that was the best thing ever, not just for the dolls, but I was so interested in the fact that these had been made. And I can remember sitting in the backyard. It was important that I was outside, since so much of my work since has been about the outside, sitting on a swing, trying to figure out the kind of the Kathleen version of knitting with knitting needles and some wool, who knows where I got it, and making little loops and knots. And I got this kind of scraggly tail that didn't amount to anything anybody would call knitting. But one of my babysitter at the time saw what I was doing and began to teach me how to knit. And so I was, to me, that was, the fishing rod and the fish story. As soon as I had some capacity to make something, my dolls were very well clothed. So that has continued. The handwork has continued and has become a really important way that I use my own practice, but also engage with people, because I'm very interested in having people feel their own creativity in practice. And so one of my projects is called Learning with the St. Lawrence. This is a long-term research project that links environmental scientists and artists and people who are members of the general public or stakeholders to do with our beautiful 1,200-kilometer St. Lawrence River that runs alongside Montreal here and eventually reaches the Atlantic Ocean, that links us all in a sort of a connection with ecosystems, environmental and social justice, and the possibility of making in relatively sustainable ways. So what I'm showing you here now is a very large collaboratively generated piece that includes cyanotypes made alongside the river using stencils and salvaged natural materials after one of Montreal's ice storms. There's a lot of eco-printing in the middle that is, again, from some of the salvaged natural material that allows the plants to give their imprints directly, as does the cyanotype, into the materials. So the plants are the collaborators at this point. And there's also natural dyeing in the squares around the border of the different colors that are either local plants or could be local plants. There were some that we didn't necessarily grow or salvage, but others who were adjacent did. And I should say that I am assisted in all my work by an extraordinary team of research assistants here at the university. I'm very fortunate to have Pramila and many others in the room who work with me on this and the other project I'll show you. And I think part of the pleasure of having funding to do projects is to create a community of practice within and beyond the university that allows us to move some of these ideas forward and to collect people's stories and their own knowledge about place, about making, and about what these mean to them together. So this particular piece was made with probably about 175 different people over a course of about 10 months. We had different events in different places where we would sit and embroider with people. So on the cyanotype panels are embroidered features, and you'll see some of that here close up. So we've got different species that would be river livers in some way, or river adjacent. So some insects, some local very familiar species, squirrels, beavers, herons, seagulls, things that people know and recognize. Part of my work is about connecting with people where they are and ensuring that their reality is part of what is included. So people had the opportunity to work with either outlines that we had lightly sketched onto the cyanotype and stitch and infill those. Those included the words in names of species in English, French, and Ganyangaha or Mohawk, which is the predominant First Nation in this area, that described some of these species, or they could add their own stuff. And so we've had all kinds of things added in, from bacteria that some of the scientists added in, to waves and patterns. It's been a really extraordinary adventure to see the creativity of people and the generosity of them sitting and stitching with us, sometimes for hours at a time. As I say, I'm interested in the public pedagogies, and so what you'll see in the bottom left panel here are some of the informational panels that were part of the displays when we were working with others. So they explain the process of natural dyes, that you can get plants from dyes, that doing so can be less harmful to the environment than using chemical dyes. And similarly with the eco-printing process, that's a process that takes the plants as collaborators, and it is a relatively neutral, environmentally neutral process to use, as is cyanotype of the photographic processes. It's one of the least damaging to our planet. And I think that's been important to me as I've gone on in my career. As I say, I started drawing and painting, again, I guess I was, more self-taught than perhaps I could have been, in that somebody, when I was a little kid, gave me some oil paints. And so I thought, well, watercolor, you use water with the paint. Oil paints, you use oil with the paint. So I worked with linseed oil only as my medium. I didn't use any kind of turpentine or volatile solvent. And it was a real shock to me when I got to art school, and people did, because all of a sudden I, with my crappy immune system, stopped being able to breathe well. And I had to wear an acid vapor mask if I wanted to go into any of the studios. I thought, this is not a good thing. And I realized as years went by that if it was not good for me to be breathing, it was perhaps not good for the planet that we were creating with some of these materials, or at least that I didn't want to. Similarly with acrylic paint, it's so convenient and easy to use, but it's plastic. And I really didn't want to bring more plastic into the world that seems to have a surfeit of plastic. So I moved toward some of these more sustainable practices, which has made things complicated for me because I can't do what I was trained to do and still love. It's really almost like a body, it's like when you've eaten way too much of something and you get sick, you can never eat it again. You loved it, and that's why you ate so much. I loved painting, but I just can't do it anymore. It's hard. So I love textiles, thankfully, and I work more and more with textile practices because of the opportunity for sustainability. Textiles themselves are not naturally sustainable, certainly not the way the industry has worked things, but the way I see people today speaking, farmers who are working with plants and with animal materials. So I have also been very involved in a project called The Future is Wool. I've been, since I was a kid, I've loved wool. And, the other great thing about wool is there are sheep. And so if you love cute little animals, then,
Like poodles.
then you've got, yes, and they're like poodles, which also are an animal close to my heart. Some of you will see that I have my poodle emblem with me today. The Future is Wool is a project that I started in various ways about 10 years ago that really was looking at the possibilities of wool environmentally in our future, as well as in our present, to encourage sustainability, to support regional farmers, as well as farmers around the planet. Every continent except the Antarctic has some kind of wool cultural history, wool culture. The sheep are one of the first animals that have been domesticated over the years, and there are so many different breeds that are adapted to different climates and contexts that there is wool and wool making everywhere. And so I got interested most recently in trying to do a collaborative project that brought together some of the ideas around wool, around making, some of the specificities of sheep, but thinking as much as I'm interested in global arcs of our growing arc here in this regional part of the country particularly. What are we doing here? We've got fabulous farmers who are very concerned with sustainability. We've got circles of makers, the Cercle des Fermières, various different guilds, all kinds of people who are interested in handwork. What if we were to come together in a research project that both had a creative output in a stitched tapestry, but that was a people's history that incorporated the ideas that people have about the benefits of wool and the possibilities in the future. So this is a project we're just, I guess, about 8 months into the 3 years of it. And again, many people here, including Pramila and others in the room, work with me on this, and I couldn't do it without their support. So we are creating a tapestry, a Bayeux-style tapestry that tells histories and futures of wool with an emphasis on Canada and this region. When I say Bayeux, you may think of the tapestry from the 1080s, the medieval tapestry that tells the story of William the Conqueror's, the French Duke, I guess, as he was at the time, arrival in England and the big battle that happened there, and the French took over England at that time. It's an extraordinary artifact, all made with wool on linen, as ours is, all, of course, naturally dyed, as ours is. All our wool is either naturally dyed or sheep colored, undyed. Some of the ranges you'll see in the middle panel there, some of the ranges of colors we're using, both at the bottom group of skeins, those are sheep colored, and the top group are naturally dyed. And these have been collected by our team from different fiber farmers in Quebec, in Ontario, and as far west as Manitoba at this point. And so we're working ahead, making up the story, but we're also inviting people to send us their stories, send us their content. So there's an online component to this, which is a questionnaire that invites people to tell us their wool stories, to include pictures, upload pictures that we can version into illustrations that become part of our tapestry. And so that it's not, as the Bayeux story is, a story of war. It's not aiming politically to justify a new regime of politics. It's aiming to celebrate what's actually happening in this great groundswell of return to natural practices, to work with the soil, with regenerative sheep farming really nourishes the soil, to think about the wool that comes from a sheep who is well-fed, happy, well-treated, and it produces beautiful wool that then can produce beautiful artwork that is created in community. We go to different fiber events and at other pop-ups here and elsewhere to give people the opportunity to join us in stitching what we already suggest as designs, but also to add in, as we did with the St. Lawrence work, things that they might like to see as part of the tapestry. We launched the project last August at Twist, which is a very large fiber festival here in Quebec and Saint-André-Avelin. They get thousands of visitors every year. It's a 3-day project. We had 102 people sit and stitch with us, some for a very long time, some coming back day after day, some just for a few minutes. Our youngest recorded stitcher was 5 years old, and our oldest visitor, she wasn't ready to stitch, she was visiting in a wheelchair, was 95. So I think that this is the other thing I like about wool, about handwork, is its interculturality, its intergenerationality, its accessibility, so that if somebody is in a position to hold a needle and thread, they can do something on our tapestry, even if they've never done that before. So we had very serious engagement by kids and lots of older stitchers showing the new stitchers how to do things, as well as my great team there to back things up. So that's a lot of the community work I do. I'll just end by briefly mentioning some of my own studio practice, which, as you know, moves more and more to sustainability, to do the least harm, and where possible, to do good. I would like my work to rot well someday. And so not right away, but someday when it's all landfill, as we all are dust, that it will nourish the soil rather than add noxious chemicals or plastics. So this is a tapestry that I created in collaboration with the Textile Lab in Tilburg, the Netherlands, where there's a research center that looks at questions around textiles and making. This is entirely natural fibers, cotton warp and cotton wool and linen weft. This was created on a digital jacquard machine, a commercial loom that created has a width of 160 centimeters. So each of those panels is 160 centimeters, and the figure that is there is a little larger than life size, just so that you know the figure in the right panel. This piece, as you can see, is called Unbalanced Rebalancing, and it takes us to the river, thinking about the length of the St. Lawrence, the whole flow of it, which starts in our Great Lakes near Gananoque area and continues as far as the Atlantic Ocean. So the things that we do with the river here now impact everybody ultimately, because the water will flow. It also references, with the white figure on the right, some of the other work that Learning with the St. Lawrence has been able to commission from artists, field notes that are geolocated works of art that people have created about the St. Lawrence in some way and what it means to them, that are all on the project website. The image is a still from a video performance by Suzanne Kite, who is a Lakota artist now based in the US, but was doing her PhD here at Concordia and did a performance that linked to the change in elevation of the St. Lawrence River, referencing specifically the dredging that was done and the destruction of the natural environment on the south side of the river, adjacent to Gananoque, which is the reserve there, the Mohawk Reserve, the Mohawk community. And so there is still a great deal, and very understandably, of loss for the Mohawk community associated with the building of this colonial waterway system, the St. Lawrence Seaway, that is now too small, really, to move a lot of the biggest ships that have to travel to carry all our stuff that we buy from all over the world. But this piece aims to think about unbalanced and rebalancing. We have been unbalanced in our relationship with the planet. We are like this figure of a surfer. This is from an image I took from a standing wave on the St. Lawrence, where people go and try and stand and surf and fall off and stand back up and surf again and fall off and stand back up and fall off. And so I'm really hoping that we're rebalancing, that, with I hear all of the work today and more to come, and the things this afternoon with hands-on, that we're trying to tilt the emphasis so that we move back to sustainable practices, that we valorize the local and the regional amongst the many other things that we do, that we think about the rights of the planet and of the species that comprise the extraordinary ecosystems of the St. Lawrence and our world as a whole, that we think with place, that we learn with the St. Lawrence and with the materials that we use. And I think that's me, so.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Okay, I can take the remote. We'll have Amruta next online, and the people, everyone who's sitting in person, we have tea, coffee, and some snacks for you, so please feel free to grab one. Yeah, we can start with Amruta, and some of you must be wondering that we might be going a little slow, but I think all the talks are so important and interesting at the same time. Most of us are circling back to the river, fiber, soil, and since when I came here, I was also wondering that I came from such rich, not only textile, but all kind of handwork, which is every street you go, people are working by hand. So I was excited when I came here, what is happening with the textile or anything here? So I was searching and going to the farms, visiting sheep, meeting all of you wonderful people. So there is a context of where we are privileged in India and other part of the world where we have these practices and knowledge holders still who can share the knowledge and the materials are still available. But the other side, this is also very interesting where all of us are trying to bring back this new narrative, but with the same thinking. So I'm very happy. When we were thinking about this Crafting Commons as a larger symposium, all of us had brainstormed and one theme was emerging all the time. We didn't want it to just focus on the fibers because it's our loved language. We all come from textiles, but the craft is so wide and the material knowledge itself, and it all interconnected from fiber to other materials. So I'm glad we are seeing all the diverse knowledge system today. Over to you, Amruta, today.
Hi. So I'm a textile designer and I practice from Bangalore, India. And today what I'm presenting is one of the projects that we worked on in Himachal Pradesh, which is in northern India. It's a state that borders the Himalayan range. And so what you're looking at here is the Lahaul Valley in Himachal Pradesh. And so this was a project that I did for a community-based organization that works out of Himachal called the Wool Knitters. And in this region, in Himachal and the regions bordering the Himalayan mountains, you've got a design program that's been going on for a bit called the Himalayan Knot Program, and which is very generously funded by the Aisha Group in India. So this was one of the funded projects last year, and we had the opportunity to go into the valley and train artisans in the carpet making technique that they call the sugden. So this is a traditional practice that has been followed in the Lahaul Valley for several centuries now. They knot carpets in the Tibetan knotting style, which has traveled across this region. So you also see it in Ladakh. in the northern area. But what we've seen is that the practice has kind of waned over time. So the work is rigorous. It takes time. It's intricate, right? So there was a decline because there's a large flooding of the market with inexpensively made carpets, and from more industrial craft centers in Uttar Pradesh. So the point of the project was to kind of retrain artisans in this traditional skill that they already practice, which they've kind of stopped doing right now. And it's how we did this was what was really interesting, because the Lahore Valley is covered in snow in winter, right? But that is also exactly the same time when the artisans have time to to learn something new, because there's no farming going on, and I mean it's a period of lull, right? So they're mostly just getting together. They've got archery, and they've got all of these activities that they plan for their communities. So we went in at this time, and took up their community center, set up these screens and projectors and all of that. And we had a field designer, Ajinkya, who was on ground in sub-zero temperatures. And I connected with these. Our first batch was in this village called Jispa, which is the last village um, uh, from after which you kind of bike towards Ladakh. So, so I would connect with them digitally over a very, very wonky internet connection, and so we looked at design. We looked at how to make crafts. We looked at how they can bring back the patterns that they used to traditionally make, but to be able to kind of think it through from a market relevance perspective, because so far these artisans were only making these carpets for the community, but we thought that with such intricate skill, and with I mean it's such a beautiful product, right? We thought it would be nice to kind of take it to the rest of the world. So we looked at design together over a period of 2 months. And our first batch was 8 artisans in Jispa. So that was very successful. The artisans learned, relearned the skill of making these carpets. We also, so that's the training was one part of the project, right? The other was to try and bring in or put together that wool value chain, the wool ecosystem in the region. And oddly, there's so much sheep rearing that happens in Himachal, and it is nomadic shepherding is one of the larger occupations in the state. But if you were to ask these shepherds what they do with the wool, it's most often discarded, right? So that wool ecosystem really was not great. You had skills on one side, but you did not have material as much. So we kind of tried to also build the bridge for that. And so the first batch of carpets that we wove in the Jispa village, we had to go back to weaving centers like Panipat, and pull out surplus yarn from all the production that's happening for international markets. So that's what we brought into Jispa to start off the program. And while we were figuring that out, while we were doing that, while we were running the program, we were also figuring out how to bring this ecosystem back, how to bring hand-spun yarn back. So a lot of these artisans, they were spinning at home, right? They did have small spindles, and they would be making wool yarn at home, but it was a very small amount, and it was for personal consumption. So if we were to run a program like this, we had to kind of figure out how to bring that wool back into the system. So that was the first cohort that we had, a batch of 8 artisans. And post that, because it was successful, and we replicated the program in another village. So the second village, so the artisans from the village of Jispa were the ambassadors of the craft then. And then word spread. So when we started the next batch, we had about 13 artisans, and we ran the program a little faster the second time around, because we were close to the end of winter, and then the farming seasons would start. But as a team, all of us at the Wool Knitters also figured out what works, what to teach, what their first carpets should be, what sizes, how do we go back to the historic knottage and the weight, because over time, because the carpets take time to make, a lot of the construction had gotten looser, the wool had gotten coarser, so we went back to older methods of making, tighter weaves, finer yarn. So yeah, that's what we had on this project. So now post training, so this is a picture of all of the artisans with the carpets that they made. So post training, one of the reasons I'm here to present the project as well is to find homes for these carpets now. We've got a new batch of 9 weavers who have started in a new village called May in the Lahore Valley, and that's the program that we are currently running. And so we're looking at creating, so one was to train the artisans, and the other is to find the market for the product. So we're trying to present the project as often as we can, showcase our catalogs, so that we find homes for these beautiful carpets. Yeah, so that's it from me. Thank you.
I hope any of you want. I don't know how the experience works, but the people listening in India, you must invest in it. It's a good investment. Yeah, we move to the Anne-Marie now. You want, or?
I can just make a little wink.
Okay, sounds great.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Anne-Marie Laflamme. I'm a designer, and I'm also a lecturer here at Concordia, where I teach research classes to design students, and we introduce them to textile and sustainability in those classes. And I'm also co-directing the studio Atelier Bay, which is a clothing studio here in Montreal that is existing since 2009, so already almost 17 years, that I co-direct with a very close friend of mine called Catherine Métivier. And the project that I want to present today started there in the workshop in a very concrete way, through a growing pile of textile remnants that was created through our manufacturing process. So we've been obsessed with optimizing resources and not wasting anything at the studio. And we started being interested, in circularity and eco-conception. And in 2029, we started a specific project that was a bit more radical than the previous ones, where we tried to reduce the waste through some more applied solution. But I wanted to move away from this like maybe business model or production constraint, and bring this work into the academic world to slow down a little bit, have more time to think, and also maybe explore new avenues for this project. So there was more uncertainty and more time for experimentation and thinking. So those are the questions that I've been obsessed with for a few years. What happens when textile waste is not treated as a problem to solve, but as a material to think with. It gives more possibilities or new possibilities. And how can remnants become agents that shape aesthetic, knowledge, and future material practices? So I'm seeing the material not only as textile, but as a fiber or a new medium that I work in new forms. So this image here is my hand working directly with the pulp coming from the textile. I've been really interested in the new materiality thinkers such as Jane Bennett, the idea of the material agency, so the fibers coming a collaborator as well. The matter is not passive, but it participates in what emerges. So making became for me a way of listening to this new collaborator. So the fiber resisted, it dried unevenly, and it forced me to adapt to it instead of trying to control it as I was doing before in a more industrial design approach. So the knowledge didn't come from planning, but from the gesture itself, from obsessive repetition of making and from the contact with the material. So the hand carries memory. So I felt that the movement carried the memory from the previous attempts, the previous failures, the sensation, and this is a kind of a tacit embodied knowledge that can be extracted from the process, but it only exists through making. So this was one of my beautiful surprise of the research. Here is a book that I made during a residency of making that I made at Studio Atelier Retail. I wanted to document what most of the time disappears in design research and design documentation. So things like affect, care, and relationships. I told you about seeing the fiber as a collaborator, but there's also other thinkers and makers behind every project. Like I never work only by myself, I'm surrounded. So inspired by friendship as a method, this collaboration becomes also a way of producing knowledge. So in this book, you can find, some conversation, some shared gestures, drawing of the many hands working together, some hesitation, some shared conversations, and the trust that was developed during this process. So they are sewn directly into the page. So I feel that instead of a neutral documentation, this book tries to hold place of people, moments, and shared thinking. So yeah, it resists the idea that research is solitary or objective, and I feel that this knowledge is relational, is situated, and collective, more like the craft itself that we've been presenting today. So here are some of the artifacts, some unfinished, some unresolved. To me, they are not solutions, they are thinking objects. They explore tensions between smoothness and roughness, some grids, some collapse, some familiarity because they are shapes that we recognize, but also some discomfort because of the material they are made with, especially when we get closer to them. There are some that are exhibit there, so if you want to look at them closely later. The found structures, also some furniture skeletons or fences and grids, they reappear from the pulp, carrying their own histories as well. They have been found around the studio and around the neighborhood where the remnants are created. They were discarded and they've been reused in the project. So it's a dialogue between those things. And this openness, I feel, allows the material to remain active. And the work doesn't aim to just master the fiber, but negotiate with it. So now I'm at the end of a part of the research, but because I feel it will be a never-ending project. But I want to end where the project began, with accumulation, the mountain of textile remnants that we create in the fashion industry. So by slowing down in this academic context, I've allowed myself to be surprised and seeing this material as a collaborator instead of a resource to optimize. So those learning now feed back into my work as a designer and as a teacher as well and a studio practitioner. So slowness, care, and attention, I feel that they don't slow innovation, but they change its direction. And I want to treat waste as a shared material common. Perhaps we can imagine futures that are not just, efficient, but more attentive, relational, and livable. So thank you. We can continue the discussion later.
Thank you so much, Anwari.
I tried to respect the time frame.
Absolutely. We are almost end of our panels. We'll hand it over to Nadia now. Nadia, would you like to have, or I can also help you with the wing. Okay, sounds good.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nadia Bunyan. I am currently a master's student in the Indie program at Concordia, but my background is as a fashion designer. I was in the industry for over 20 years, and it was really the search for reconnecting to textiles that led me to academia and to create an organization, co-found an organization, a nonprofit called Growing Arc. So Growing Arc, the term arc really is the basis of the work that we do and what I think about when I consider what change can look like and how it can come about. I see that as being ways that we activate, reciprocate, and cultivate knowledge, understanding, relationships, community. With Growing Arc, we use the farm to closet process to enter into conversations about sustainability and bringing people more into contact with things that we use on a day-to-day basis and thinking about the processes behind them, where they come from, the hands that touch them, all the relationships that have to exist in order for that material to exist, and to think about that in a broader context of how we relate in the world. And that's to then inform, when we talk about sustainability, that it is much bigger than just a material. It is about our relationships, the interconnections of our social systems, the dynamics within our economic systems, what goes on in terms of our environment, and knowing that they're all interconnected. And as human beings, we are very much a part of that discussion. So in this picture, you see our playdates, which we started, the organization started in 2022 through a project at Parc Jean Drapeau with an organization called the Campus de la Transition Écologique, which was about increasing biodiversity. So we took this opportunity to enter into a conversation that was more about science, to add this component of material culture, to make it more accessible for people to understand and connect to the notion of biodiversity. We also wanted to expand this notion of biodiversity to not just be about the microbes and the insects and the birds and those species that would circulate in the garden, but the people, to make sure that when we talk about sustainability, everybody's voice has a space. So rooted in inclusivity and not being included. In this picture, you see what we call our talk circles. That's the first picture, with a professor from UQAM who actually studies soil health. And in the middle, you see folks who gather and do different crafting, because we meet in the park and we craft in our gardens. And at the end, you have some folks who are working with flax. So in our playdates are really spaces for people to come together and test different crafts. My family's Caribbean, and we have a saying, we say, try a thing. It means you just come and you try something. And in trying, you learn. It's the experimentation, it's the play that allows you to open up your mind and your way of thinking. It's the meditative process of using your hands, of handwork. So just giving people space where they can explore and play with that without feeling obligated to have to make something fantastic or to be great. The whole point is just to allow yourself a moment to try. In our playdates, everything is from the farm, so we start with the things that we grow, those being dye plants, textile plants, and then showing people how we process them and transform them, or get them to engage in the process of transforming. We also have events called swap and sews, where people come together and bring clothing that they may have wanted to discard or didn't know what to do with. So it's a clothing swap, but also showing them how they can mend or repair or alter or transform those pieces. So always thinking about play and the uncertainty of what's to come being the space to run wild with and just let go. We have, as I said, gardens in, the first one is our garden at Parc Jean Drapeau, where we have 15 different plots with an integration of different plants growing together, some indigenous, some non-indigenous. We grow things like cotton, indigo, marigolds, just a variety of different plants that we then harvest and work with through our different activities. We also grow flax, which you can see the flax on a farm just outside the city. And we have also started another project, 2 projects in another area in the city called Côte-de-Neige, where we work with the Côte-de-Neige Black Community Association at Nelson Mandela Park and with the Maison des Jeunes in Martin Luther King Park. And both of these projects were combining textile and agricultural crops, food crops, to have a conversation not just on food sovereignty, but how that connects to our food and the clothes that we wear, really showing that these are dynamically interconnected systems and that you can't discuss one without discussing the other. And really having that conversation in communities that most of the time are marginalized within the default context of what sustainability is, what that looks like. We also think about growing art as a bridge. We are there because we're folks who have a love of textile and community and want to build accessible points of entry for folks who don't normally have that. We work with different organizations. Up at the top, we did a workshop with the Young Roots Farm, which really helps kids within the city who don't normally have access to many resources. And we did a flax project with some of the seniors in Côte-de-Neige. We did some weaving, that's some of the flax that we have grown that had been transformed into yarn, creating linen, and we set up a small loom, and you can see we actually use sticks as our heddles. All of this is about experimentation, really showing people that it doesn't take having a multitude of resources, it just takes allowing yourself space to imagine. We worked with from seniors to younger folks, so also in this community building and thinking about how material culture can be an access point for these dynamic conversations, it's an intergenerational space. It's a space based in inclusivity, and it's a space based in relationality. And that's just some of the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you kept me first. Okay. Can we move to Megha, and then I can close the, I can do that for her. Okay. Okay. Megha, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been very, very exciting to hear everyone share their work. I see so many parallels, and I really look forward to the discussion. I'm just going to briefly talk about my PhD research. So I'm a doctoral researcher at Nottingham-Trent University. I sit within the School of Art and Design, and I'm looking into indigenous world from the mountains, but my focus of my study is on design craft engagement. So what happens when designers go into the field and they try to engage with artisans? I guess I should probably start from why wool and what's this fascination with wool and this material. So I'm sure Kathleen would really like this image. So on the left, these are 2 photographs taken by Christina Noble Singh, who spent a lot of time in the mountains as a trekking enthusiast, and she kind of studied, or she's rather lived with Gaddi, and Gaddi is a community that you find in the mountains in the Himalayas, and Gaddi means a lot of things in the local language, and in Hindi it can be translated to seat. It means it describes the community, the shepherd community. It's also the word for the breed of the sheep, and the people that you see on the image, the man that you see in the image carrying that Lamb is a Gadi man, so they are shepherds and they're transhumanists, which means they move from the alpine region to the lower region to graze, to help their sheep graze. And they have a very close relationship with the animals. They almost kind of see them as an extension of their family, and they take care of these animals. Likewise, and on the right, you'll see hands of Teji Dadi, a woman I met during my fieldwork, who is weaving with that wool. So that was a starting point for me to look into the communities who work with the material, and then how it kind of translates from wool in its fiber form on the animal to the wool that we see and put on our bodies. Next slide, please, Pramila. This is just a video. I think it'll play on its own. Oh, okay. If you could just go back.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you? No, never mind. That was just a video of where my field is. I was trying to pinpoint as to how this journey kind of transpired. So in that video, I had points marked all over the mountains where I went on walks. So the method that I used to kind of engage with the community members was something called a tag along, which is essentially where you kind of, as the word says, you tag along with the locals. So I went on different walks with people, without people, kind of chasing sounds, looking out for sheep, and having conversations while on these walks. So I kind of tried to map that walk. The idea was to kind of illustrate how the research was not linear at all, and I kind of ended up in places multiple times without knowing that I was about to reach there. And sorry, Pramila, if you could just stay on that slide, please. So the purpose of the research, as I said, was to understand how design, craft, engagements take place. And my research is kind of looking into this art, or rather craft of research, and the process of slowing down when you're trying to engage with different communities. What you see on this slide are just 3 images of how textiles and, in this case, buildings interact, and also some elements of nature. So the first photograph that you see on the left is a door to a kitchen or to a house, and then you see some plants outside, along with fodder for the cow. The plant that we see over there, something called mori or bon, is, as the locals say, a sheep's favorite plant or sheep's favorite leaf. A lot of my conversations with people while on my walks were around this plant, as to how precious it is, how there were some regions in a shepherd's village where they had sacred pockets where these trees could not be cut, but they are also cut because they need to be fed to the sheep. So I would come across this plant on various walks, but not knowing what the name of these plants is. It was only like after a week into the field, I realized what this plant was and what kind of significance it had for the community. On the left, on the right, you see images of these buildings where you can see animals and humans coexisting. So on the very right, that's a very typical structure for a house that you find in the mountains, which is in the ground floor, you'll have the animal. So the animal is kept in there, be it sheep, be it cow, be it goat. And the first floor is kind of used by the humans. That's where they live. And the warmth from the animals kind of heats up the first floor. So they kind of coexist together in this space. And you can also see a loom over there. I mistook a lot of these looms as being sort of dead, that no one would be using them. But it was only after spending days with them and kind of having conversations with them that I realized that almost all the looms here are operating, and they just look in that state when they're busy with their farm work. So it was quite interesting to see how different kind of visual sites, as a designer, without anyone telling me what it is about, it was very difficult to understand what they signified. If we could move to the next slide, please, Pramila. The next 3 images that I wanted to kind of talk about was how, as a researcher, I had to kind of change my pace. I had to change my speed. I had to change my tempo to match the pace of the locals, and how research was almost impossible if I had followed my timelines that I had come in with as a PhD, as a researcher, as a designer. You come in with these expectations that I have to ask these questions. I have filled this ethics form, which means I have to conduct 10 interviews with 10 people in 10 different locations. And so I had a very regimental approach to my research when I went into the field. but it was very, very soon, or like rather shortly after kind of reaching Himachal, I was stuck indoors because of a snowstorm, and I had to throw everything out of the window, which meant I had to really understand how to live like the locals if I have to talk to them. So these images are just a representation of how my research was shaped by the people and their timelines. On the left, you'll see a shepherd who was coming back from the village up, kind of, which was kind of further up from my primary site. And he was coming back to his own village. And I heard him and I kind of just chased and ran after him and tried to have a conversation with him. So again, this was something that I did not anticipate I would be able to do. It was only when I started noticing, which kind of took me back to the art of noticing in terms of art of research, that I could find, or I could kind of connect with the people who could teach me more about their practices. In the middle is just an image of how I was kind of, I had to stop completely. Like I could not do anything. I could not go out because there was a lot of snow and the roads were blocked. The trees had fallen, so you couldn't drive anywhere. And there was no electricity for 4 days. So I was just kind of stuck in the house with my host, and that was it. So I feel like the field really kind of tested me on this field trip. And on the very right is an image of just some smoke coming up from the wood. But this is after an hour-long conversation with around 12 women. They saw me wandering around. They invited me for food and they said, would you like to eat with us? And we were just parked around this logwood and had a meal together, spoke about the village. They shared a bunch of stories about how they use the wool, how they kind of adapt their looms to different sorts of wool, information that I wasn't really trying to find. The intention of my kind of interaction with them wasn't to know anything about wool. It was just to kind of be there and kind of understand how they move about, like how can I be a part of their world. And interestingly, the reason why I took that photograph was because of that smoke. We kind of started moving away from the smoke because it was like really burning our eyes and we were not enjoying the experience. And in that kind of forced proximity, we were kind of really bunched up together, which made us giggle a lot and opened up conversations in a different way. So I think I wanted to show these images to illustrate how, in this instance, my research was very much shaped by more than human, these elements that you can't really anticipate, the elements that are kind of beyond your control, and kind of are a nod to the process that I kind of took to conduct my research and to understand the connections between people and their local environment. And yeah, that's about it. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Megha. I'm going for my field research right after this symposium. And I was talking to Rachel the other day that I don't want to anticipate big plans. Let me just go travel, stay with them and see how it unfolds. At this note, I know the friends who are joining from India, it's super late for you, especially Juhi and me were talking. She's been not sleeping for 14 hours. If anybody has any questions specifically for Juhi, or Juhi, you want to say something at this point before leaving the panel, we are happy to.
I'm really sorry for leaving. That's what I'm going to say. I just can't stay awake. I've been up since like 6 a.m. and it's just been a long day. I haven't been able to take a break before this started, and I have another long day tomorrow in the field. So thank you so much, Pramila, and thank you all of you. I think there's so much of resonating work happening all over the world. This has been great, and I hope we can all connect somewhere in the future. And if any of you are coming to India, need any information from the northeast to the western part of India, just feel free to write to me. Thank you and good night. And I'm really sorry, Pramila, for getting out.
No, it's absolutely fine. I understand that. And I'm so grateful all of you could make time, because when we were thinking of this conversation, I thought it was very important to have all of you on board, because you're working on the field constantly past many years. You are like inspiration and mentors to us. So I thought it's important to bring these voices, and you took time. So I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you. Namaste. See you.
Namaste. Bye. Hi.
Bye.
So mine is the last presentation. I will not take much of your time. I'll go really fairly quickly. I'm Pramila Choudhary. I've already introduced myself in the beginning, but I'll briefly do it, the people who joined us later. I'm a PhD candidate and public scholar here at Concordia University. Prior to this, my practice was into textile design, and now I'm also slowly moving into fiber art as one of my way of thinking. So what I've put together, not really to show what all I've been doing, but just to give you a glimpse when we are talking about these local methods, and then we are working for the local markets or international market, how does that look like? But when I was putting it together, one theme was constantly emerging, which is collaboration. If you see me here also, I try to collaborate with a lot of my friends and colleagues and mentors, and they're all very generous to share the space with us. So this is one thing which I learned while working with artisans even back in India. So this is one of the projects where we are working with artisanal knowledge, but for the international market. But here also we have to be really mindful. We cannot rush them. We cannot make products which are undoable for them after we come out of the space. And something we need to think, because when these kind of setups are there, people have different skill sets. So you need to come up with projects and products where they can replicate it once you are not there, and they can make it maybe not, because in the craft you cannot have numbers which are 1 lakh, but still a 50 is a big number to replicate a same product 50 times. So just to think through in a collaboration while making, and most of these artisanal practices are also generational artisan practices. When I use this word, that means they have been visually learning or embodying this knowledge from 7 generations, some craft 11 generations. There are many generations they've been doing this. This is one of the project again in northeast of India where they're using a line loom or the backstrap loom. So instead of going away from teaching them something new as a skill, we were working with them what they can do and coming up with the product where they don't need too much of aftercare of stitching or doing ornamentation. So whatever we were doing within the making process. This is another project where we were having 40 women artisans. We were working with leather jutis, and leather jutis like a footwear, and they have the skill, they can work on the smaller surfaces with hand embroidery and hand stitch. These are the skills, but how we can use that and create something, bless you, which they can carry forward later on also, because they wanted to diversify the products altogether, because they see the markets are flooding with all kind of competitive products and what they can do. So we were thinking here more of, okay, they're working on the leather, which is hard surface. Can we find an alternative which can be a canvas which is hard enough like leather, but they can have the similar feeling to work on it, and working in the smaller unit model and then assembling them rather than working on a big bag and then asking them to create something which is beyond their capacity at this stage. At the same time, there's another word keep coming up when I was there. This project I just wrapped up in July. It was 7 years long project where the idea of craft was not centered to this project. The project was about to create livelihood. And we were thinking through the craft, that how we can use craft as a learning method and create livelihood opportunities for the women and the school and college dropouts in these villages where they don't have to migrate. And they had farming cultivation of banana crops. And after 2 crops, you cannot use the plant anymore. So they have to kind of discard so again, it's a big landfill problem. At the same time, farmer has to pay. So there is a lot of interconnection of farming, what fiber is coming because we are making certain kind of nutrient, because the banana plant hold a lot of liquid which is useful for the farming again. So making something for the farmers back so that they can use in the circulation. But in the process, a lot of fiber is coming. So how we can use those fibers? So we are setting up handloom. This project was more on the system design rather than doing something collaboratory as a product. So in this case, what happened, we took like 3 long years just to train. There was no monetary benefit, there was nothing, because it was a non-profit and they had a funding to implement that. But here we are also working with like in government bodies and other collaborative ways. But the idea was here, because they had this liberty where they were not worried about revenue at the day one, we could spend like 3 long years to set up all the system where they are, use the natural materials, and even the idea was not to use electricity at all in the process, so that, because in the villages you must have seen how Juhi was talking, and the electricity is not there, and even Megha was mentioning, so it's difficult to depend on something which is not naturally available in the space. With all these thinking, I started then diverting into a lot of my fiber art practice is more on my reflection before the craft, working with these large manufacturing companies and looking at the first-hand textile waste, which is 500 kg, sometime more than that for a one day when you make a t-shirt. So those were also reflections, emerging theme in my textile art projects. So with this thinking and this whole collaborative idea, I'm going back to the field. You can see my grandmother, I was talking about her in the beginning. She's standing in front of her own hand-woven, hand-spun, hand-embroidered Pattu textile from Thar Desert. And I'm very curious. I went there many, many times for this textile past 10 years, but this time I'm going with a really open mind, because things are changing rapidly, and just to see and listen from the elders, but at the same time, I'm really curious about the young generation, what they see, because after COVID, there are a lot of technological interventions are happening, and young generation do have some interest, so let's see what happened. But the idea is not to create anything. Idea is to be with them, learn, and see where it goes from the field. So I'm just trying, this time, instead of designer, I'm trying to work more as a researcher, where I'm working directly from the materials, because when I was working as a designer, I had this privilege to access to the raw material or the techniques and everything else. But here, I was trying to step back a little and observe what happens when you do, when I use the word embodied knowledge, like how does it feel like, how long I can sit at a place and card or spin or weave, and it changed altogether my thinking process, and I'm sure it will reflect when I go to the field as well. So yeah, here we will close today's presentation section. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. Everyone is around, and we would like to have questions if you have any. We do have questions which we prepared, but I would encourage all the panelists, online and offline, if you have questions for each other, please, this is your chance. Ask questions, because I feel there are a lot of overlapping themes going on, from water to river to soil to fiber to plants and growing as a agricultural practice. So I would open the space for that, and also from anybody from the audience if you have any questions. Thank you so much. Over to you. Or Megha, would you like to ask a question? Since you are online and you have access to all the online people.
I think I've got a question from Molly Claire, and I think that's for me. So that's convenient. Perhaps I'll start with that.
Okay.
So Molly Claire has dropped a comment, and she's kind of pointing at the slowness, collaboration, care that she could see in these presentations. So her question, I guess, to all of us is, do any of the speakers have strategies for cultivating or protecting slowness and its many gifts in our own respective work? So I guess it's for all of us. So if there are any online panelists who have any thoughts on what strategies have you built or cultivated or used to kind of protect this slowness or even promote this slowness within your practice? If there's anyone online who has any thoughts. We can also open it to the offline presenters and panelists. I mean, people who are in the fourth space, if they have any thoughts on.
Anyone here in the space, you can just raise your hand. I can bring a microphone around to you.
Okay. Yeah. I can speak about it in terms of being an anthropologist whose method is ethnography, in which slowness is kind of an integral component. Of course, ethnography is fraught with like power imbalance, there's exploitation that's possible, there's a whole bunch of different problematics that's part of the process. But an integral aspect of it is to be in the field, which means actually being there. So the things that Megha was describing, what Pramila has been talking about, not so much thinking about what is this data that you want to collect, but just being there to see how things are, where do you fit in, how can you exist in a way that is, reciprocal with the community that you're living in, and that can take years. So there are anthropologists who worked with communities for 20 years, 30 years. I've been working with this community since 2008. My fieldwork itself continuously took 2 years, but I've been in touch with them through like WhatsApp and just visiting them in the field, and sometimes like in my home, on and off for all of this time. So I think thinking about it in terms of human relationships is really important. Like, of course, we're all very much concerned with materials, but for me, the materials are a form of mediation for human relations. And so keeping that in mind allows you to take it slow because you're thinking about people and not things and processes necessarily.
Anyone wants to add to this? I guess everyone's, yeah, yours is like...
I have a very different background. I can answer to that as a designer, as an entrepreneur as well, maybe, because, things are busy and we always have so much to do. So for me, it has been by true research that allowed me to stop, me and not only me, all of the collaborators, because if you don't allow time to research, it will just never happen. So either it be by a residency that then you have time that is blocked, for instance, once a week, or in research in the university context, you have milestone you have to figure out and to approach. So like force this time of research that brings slowness to the thinking and the making. I think it was my only way to do it, if so that things would not just go as usual. Yeah.
Yeah, slowness and making goes hand in hand. When we work with the craft specifically, also I don't know the term craft, but anything we are making by hands, I guess when we rush, I don't think so we reach to the desired outcomes, because when you don't rush, your body also in the process come up with something which you are not even planning on the paper. So it's really interesting to slow down whenever we are working with, be it artisan communities, hand, materials. I would really encourage anyone from the online panel. Yeah, Megha, you have some questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Amrita also has a question. I had a question for Madanji. And my question, so I really loved how you kind of spoke about pottery, and I love that kind of juxtaposition of, using a material like sand to store something like water, which is quite scarce in that landscape, and I just loved it. But I had a question about you mentioned the traditional patterns that you find in different sort of pots. I wondered if you could share some examples of these patterns, and if they ever hint towards these interdependencies, like if there are any stories that these patterns kind of tell us about the local seasons and the rhythms of the environment in which it's built, or if you could just give us an insight into what these patterns are, maybe one or two. Thank you.
So patterns are like languages. I have mapped many of the patterns, not just in pottery, but another art traditions also. Like my PhD was on the wall painting traditions of a tribal community. So there also within an area, there are micro geographies also, micro regions, what you call ethnoculture zones also. Within those zones also, I've studied these graphic patterns from one village to another village to another village. And there also I saw this variety. And by looking at those patterns, you could say that, yes, this particular motif for this art form is from this and this village. Similarly in pottery also, for example, I tell you the Kutch part of Gujarat and the west part of this Badmer district just bordering to Pakistan. The textures that both the potteries from both the regions, which are divided by, if you say the aerial distance might be just 150 kilometers, it matches very much. If you further go into Pakistan and see the pottery of Sindh, the area of Sindh, then it matches with that also. So its roots goes directly back into what I said to the 3000, 2500 years before BC. So those patterns matches with that very much. Now coming to the seasons thing, this is a very interesting thing, and the slowness also that you are talking about. I have some crazy examples also how if do not have patience, how things changes actually, what reactions comes out of it, whether it's a failure, it's a success, that also happens. Crafts are mostly like seasons. You have to follow seasons very much, whether it's block printing, whether it is pottery, or whether it's a woodcraft, or whether it's any kind of weaving, or even a shearing of the sheep also, wool also. It behaves according to the seasons. In case of pottery, for example, the best clay is taken out just before the monsoon and it is left throughout the monsoon, then it is used post-monsoon. So the clay which will be used post-monsoon will be the clay which was taken out earth before the monsoon. Similarly, one of our panelists talk about Azrak. What I discovered from my block printers in Badmer district, from this same part, they used to print all the mordants, finish all the printing work with the mordant just before monsoon, and then leave the cloth for the whole monsoon to pass over it, because the moisture will enrich the mordants. And when you treat it with the dyes post monsoon, means after the festivals, like we have Diwali festival post monsoon, and that's the time when we do most of the shopping. That time the fresh printed dyed cloth will come out in the market for sale, and people will buy that cloth. The dyes will always remain, they always remain in those pieces, which is unlike today's time period when we complain that natural dyes washes away or they are not fast dyes, or they just run out very easily. Why indigo run out very easily? Because it's not getting matured. Throughout the year, we are dyeing in indigo. We do not realize what climate it requires, what temperature it requires. So that's the failure of those things. But I have very fantastic example what happened in this village, a printer's village in Balotra, where a big brand gave an order to them to do a block printing, and it was a monsoon time. They said that it's not possible because it's monsoon, because they have to resist the cloth with clay, and the clay has to dry properly before you dye it in indigo or any other kind of a dye you want to do with it. But the brand pressurized them to send the samples soon. So what they did, they dipped the cloth, the resist broke, and the cracks appeared in the textile. They sent it back to the brand. The designers liked it very much. The texture, the mistake print became a fashion later on, and that cloth flooded the market. And even today also, it is being repeated by digital prints now. So sometimes fashion also, the seasonal mistake becomes a fashion. That's also a fantastic example. But yes, crafts are like agriculture. They follow seasons, and seasons are very important for crafts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Amrita, you had raised your hand, so I guess we'll go to you next.
I just wanted to kind of add to the narrative on slowness. So with my experience, so I work both in industry and in craft, And the question was, what strategies do we have in cultivating slowness in our work? So working with craft is my strategy of cultivating slowness in work, right? So I work for international brands, and we follow seasons and cycles, and the pace of work is very, very rigorous. So then I take time out and then go into, say, a village like Jispa in Himachal. And those couple of months that we work with artisans on craft is when time slows down, right? And it's very regenerative, that practice, right? And it helps me fuel that energy back into industry. So I mean, it's a pendulum of sorts for how I work. And I think it's a really interesting question on how you actively cultivate slowness. And I didn't really think about what I do that way, but thank you for bringing it up. It's very insightful for me to think about my own practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita. I also had a thought, just to answer Molly Claire, and then I had a question for Pragya. So about slowness, because you asked about this tension, because we are situated within the university and there's like a pressure to kind of publish. There's this publish or perish culture, which requires you to be quite fast. And then we're talking about craft, which is quite slow. But there's something that quite interesting I saw in my field as well. I went into this field assuming that craft is quite a slow activity. And it is, if you look at it as a making activity, like it takes time to finish a jumper perhaps. But then I was also quite surprised to see how the women who were knitting also had fastness in their own life, like the way they were taking care of their house, like the way they were making breakfast. So like they'll be up at 5 and they'll be done by 6. So they've done the whole world's work in an hour, and the way they're kind of running around looking after their kids. So it was quite interesting for me to kind of, it was a realization for me that we tend to kind of romanticize craft and crafting communities as being slow, but perhaps they also have fastness in their own manners. And I think perhaps we're all living in the world of just these rhythms where we do go fast and then we do slow down. And as Amrita said, like how when as a practitioner, she's going fast, and then when she's in a craft space, she's going slow. So yeah, it was kind of like an interesting finding for me in the field, that from the women I learned that, oh yes, you can be ultra fast in that village, and then you can be very slow as well. So I think for me it was that how we can find ways of not flattening that kind of circadian rhythm perhaps, which we see in the modern world. So yeah, that was just a thought I wanted to share. But talking about slowness, Pragya, you mentioned that the knitting kind of, you mentioned the word connective tissue, and kind of it's a slow craft. Again, knitting is very slow, and it kind of extends caring, because you're making something for a loved one and it takes a lot of time. And then you shared how, like for a jumper, multiple people could come in to kind of knit the sleeve, knit the back. So my question to you is that, are there any narratives of knitting in India which are overlooked, which could perhaps teach us as practitioners, as researchers, about care and making, and kind of how do these two kind of go together?
Yeah, like I think I only shared a couple of stories, but there are several such stories of, what all women have knitted, especially for their loved ones. Also, something that I find really interesting and one of my favorite questions to all the knitters is, are the narratives about unraveling, and why do you do so? So we would think that you unravel because there's a mistake or there's an error, but a lot of women unravel because there's a scarcity of yarn, so you have to be creative. So you just knit and then you unravel, you knit again, and you're just experimenting. It allows you to, explore and just enjoy the process. And like you mentioned, like I think like a lot of women said that they knit because they enjoy knitting, because it gives them a pause from their daily life. So that was really true. And when I asked them, why, what else were the reasons for unraveling, they mentioned that maybe they were bored, with a sweater. So just to be creative, they would just unravel and then, reknit. And And it is again a very familiar sight that, you know, you would unravel, you would steam the wool, then you would dry it, and in winters the balconies are just flooded with, you know, these yarns, these steamed yarns, which are crinkled wool, which is drying along with, you know, other laundry. So again, that aspect never gets talked about much, but a lot of unraveling happens not because, you know, there's a mistake, but because there's a larger purpose to it. So that's one of my favorite narratives. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone sharing online. We have a couple of audience questions, so we will take that. There are two of them.
Hi everyone, so my name is Hajra Amjad and I am from MA Department of Religion and Culture. So academically I am untrained in like aesthetics, fashions, arts and design. But one thing, and I'm also from South Asian background, I'm from Pakistan and I love dressing up. And since I moved from my home country to here to Montreal, I see very like sharp contrast in the color palette here, because in Pakistan, we are crazy about colors, like there's a riot of colors. And when I moved to Montreal, I see that there are some particular patterns of colors, which I see in every fashion brands. For example, there are lots of like brown, the family of brown, beige, there's white, there's black, olive green, burnt oranges. I was just interested in exploring like what is the philosophy behind this color palette and the attire, and also how much does the capitalism dictates these decisions, especially in the Western color palette. And I was also interested, and I think there are lots of panelists from the India too. I was seeing there was also cultural appropriation of chunri, and I think from of ajrak design, which is like a shared heritage of India, Pakistan, and like in South Asian region also. Is it the dictates of market? Because I'm forgetting the name of the American designer, but like he's incorporated like the chunri designs in his like Western fashion attire. Is the shrinking of this color palettes is also dictating that? So I'm really interested in the color philosophy of these attires. Thank you so much.
Wow. I would ask all the Montreal experts here to give one answer to this very intricate question. Because that's true, in South Asia, we celebrate colors a lot. Colors are really prevalent every time, everywhere. We are wearing some right now, but in our daily life also, you see, we love colors. So I don't know, I don't have this answer for this question, so
I don't think there's any one answer to that question. I think you touched on some of the points in the question. One is seasonal. When we have it's winter outside and all we see is snow, nobody really wants to wear hot pink. So that would be one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is capitalist, because it depends on what are the colors that are being put forth by the brands, usually starting with the high-end brands and whatever has been forecasted as the trending colors for the season. Then that's going to affect what are the colors that are going to be used. And then there's the zeitgeist. What are people feeling right now? Are we in a space where people are feeling very happy? Then generally you'll tend to have clothing collections that are going to come out that are going to support, and I am talking very much within the context of like Western default settings. So you will have colors that kind of support, you know, that's the vibe right now, everybody's feeling good. Are we in a time where people are feeling a little bit more angry? We have a lot going on south of us right now, and you notice that there was the use of camouflage and clothing that are much more militarized right now, which is a direct reflection of what's happening. So there are multiple reasons why the colors are different. And I think to what everybody's been talking about and what is extremely important is specificity. We're different here. So what you see is a reflection of the people that live in Quebec, in Montreal, I'm sure what you see in Montreal is not necessarily going to be the same as what you see in the regions. Again, the clothing will change, the color palette may change slightly. So there is that specificity to it. So it's just an understanding of this is what people have grown up with here within the culture and the context that we have here, which, yes, is also influenced by whatever industry is pushing currently.
Yeah, all the trends and forecast, when you pass through the St. Catherine and you see those colors on the brands. Unconsciously, visually also you register them that maybe this is going on, but all these are very, very valid points. Anyone has anything else to add to this particular one? You are running a studio, so.
Obviously, I work with colors and I love colors. And even within Atelier B, we have different ways of using color and wearing them. Especially Catherine, who's the other designer and founder of Atelier B. She's doing a lot of outdoors sports. She's really closer to nature, as I'm more in an urban setting. She wears colors that I feel blend well into the landscape. Like she likes neutrals, really soft color, like subtle tones, as I wear, you know, bright blues, bright reds, very punchy colors with. We also love colors that are hard to name. Like when we can't name the color, usually it's a color we really love. But I don't think it represents Montreal, you know, or the industry. I think it's very specific to us. And people wearing our design might wear it in a different way with different color palettes. But I agree that, you know, we see so many black winter coats in Montreal and so many black boots and so many like a classic palette color. And it's also, I think, a way of consuming. People want to be safe and they don't take a lot of risk compared to other cultures. It's not very exciting. I agree with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'd also like just to remind everybody that there is no Montrealer. 1/3 of Montreal's population comes from somewhere else with different color histories, color palettes, fiber preferences, etc. So there's that's a context as well. But there's also the context of what is available, either at low cost or thrifted for those who are of limited means. And so that often means something that's reused or handed down the chain that is the capitalist process and product system. I have a black coat that is washable because of all the crappy stuff that gets splashed on us. I don't want a white coat or a pink coat that will not endure as long because of all that we ask of our clothing in this weather. But I would celebrate your adopting, a canary yellow coat or an emerald green coat or any other color of your desire. But I just wanted to mention the demographic richness here that means that there's a lot of variety and that what we see on St. Catherine is not what we see on Jean Talon, for instance.
Absolutely. We have one more question from there in the audience.
Hello, I'm a designer, also a professional in the industry. It's wonderful to hear about the craft, the hand making, the natural fibers, materials, the integrating of these fibers, the historical perspective, how they're being stored and how they're being studied out in the field. My question to you is, and it's something that I'm always challenged to think about, not because I really want to, but because I have to. So when we go out, when we do the field studies, when we go out into the villages and we participate, we commune with other community members, and we learn their way of doing, and we appreciate what they do because we wouldn't be there if we didn't. And we bring it back, let's say, to the city, to the university, to our workshops, to our places of work. My question is, how do you address the notion of technology compared to handcrafting, hand making? How do you protect and also address the issue of care for IP, intellectual property? So for example, we're talking about traditions, ways of doing that people, families have done for millennia. And then even then we see a progression of how it's getting better and ways of sustaining the craft how it's improving throughout the years. My question to you is now is, how do we address that issue of protection, hand making, those fibers, because even the fibers are evolving, even the cottons that we talked about, the cotton pods, having multiple cotton pods that we can't produce anywhere else but a specific place. So if you can, someone can address the issue of IP in particular in terms of protecting the ways in which ways we're making secrets, secret ingredients that we don't want to share per se. Can someone address that?
You want to do that?
First, I'm wondering, when you talk about IP, who are you speaking about in terms of owning that IP?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it can be individual, it can be institutional, especially when there are collaborations involved. So for example, let's say there is a nonprofit organization and there's a designer within the organization who has just understood how a process is done. And let's say, because it's now being brought into the commercialized market and we see the profitability, now it rests, it rests either on the individual or on the institution to protect it, either for the community or for themselves. So it's a dual-pronged question.
I have many thoughts on this.
Go for it.
Rachel said something earlier that made me smile, that the community that the studio was working with said, these patterns are ours. You cannot use these. You can use these for your commercial have you. But these you cannot touch. I love that, because I think making something commercial that comes from tradition is problematic. It shouldn't be this designer who, again, you said, learned from this community that is now bringing this into mass market to then be exploited, because in essence, that is what is going to happen. It is an exploitation of a traditional knowledge, because anything within a capitalist market is based in exploitation. That's it. That may seem like very hard, but I mean, that's the basis of capitalism. So if you use something or want to use something that comes from a traditional knowledge, and it is not because the people or the community are the ones that are heralding that or pushing that forward, I think that's already problematic, because where did the funds that go from the design or the technique or the technology that's being used, where is that going to? How is that going back to the community? But on top of that, when you're producing that, how are people being paid? And then are you taking this traditional knowledge and putting it into a context where people are not being paid fairly, and then using those funds to go back to the community, which in essence, somebody mentioned not corrupting the community. That's a part of a corruption, because you're now getting this community involved in things that they might not have thought of to be. So I think the question is very tricky. I really am a big supporter of things being small and things being local and things being specific. I think the context of fashion on the level of commercialization is dangerous. And it's dangerous given the context and the systems and the structures that we currently live in. I don't know that it can be better. I think very much about reimagining, and I think that's part of the reason why I needed to find something else to do that was not within the industry. And I appreciate academia for the sense of research and learning, but I also question academia in terms of how they get that information and what they do with it afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, you want to add to this?
Sorry, I was just trying to find the proper name of an organization, which I didn't find. Yeah. But there is a lot of work being done internationally around looking at just this question, looking at how communities can retain the rights to their own cultural property, their own intellectual property. There's a very interesting organization that I was trying to find, headed by a lawyer who's looking at how fashion oftentimes co-opts traditions, and looking at how communities can protect those traditions. So I think it's a really important area that you're identifying. There is a lot of work going on in it, and I think we're at very early days. I mean, a lot of us who work here maybe have been working in craft for a long time, but this is an area that it's difficult to navigate. And it's also spread across many different jurisdictions. So there is work being done in that area, and this organization is looking at modeling different systems that can work for craft communities and for Indigenous communities to actually set out the terms of activity, the terms of engagement with people who want to work with them. So
I hope this answers your question. We are almost on our time. We were planning 10 to 1, so we are heading towards it. If anybody has any last thoughts, anybody from the panel, online, offline, or we can. So, anybody wants to add anything? Are we good? You want to say something? Okay. Anyone from the online panel? Megha, Madanji, Amrita, Pragya, if you have any last thoughts.
No questions from me. Thank you. It's been very exciting. So it's so interesting to see all the. It's just always fascinating to see how we are so differently located, and yet our work is kind of in a way connected. So many parallels. So no questions from me, but thank you so much, Pramila, for organizing this and giving us all a platform to kind of connect to each other. I'm definitely going to email a few people I met today.
Thank you so much. What I had this one last feeling for listening to all of you here online. Some things we all are worried about the climate change, and it's absolutely worry. We have been seeing the storm happening and different things going on, but many of us are trying to hold this old world, indigenous ways of thinking. So there is a lot of work been happening. A lot of people are doing on-field, lot of work. In academia, all of you are trying to bring that knowledge system, and I guess that's the generation who will go out in the world after the university. So we are trying to bridge that somewhere, and I feel we are learning from the past, practicing in the present, but somewhere I'm hopeful for the future. Many of us who are working relentlessly for this area, it will have a great future for next generations, and which is very, very important, I feel. So that's my last thought on it. And thank you everyone joined online, offline, and we really appreciate your patience. We went little over the time, but I thought when we were talking about slowness, I didn't feel good about giving that 5-minute break and flagging it, because everybody was really talking something really, really important, and some knowledge system we never even seen and thought of, the kind of words emerged during our conversation. So me and Megha decided that because she was moderating online, I was doing in person, so we decided mutually, let it go with the pace and how it goes. For the next half of the day, we will have a lunch break. There will be a small lunch will be served, and afterwards there will be artist showcase. So artists will be in the space, so you can connect to them. Eleanor, who have co-created the space, will take you through. After 1 hour, we will jump into the workshop. So you want to take break, want to come back, call your friends, you're more than welcome. And we will close our online panel here for the morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pramila, Megha. Bye.
Thank you, Pramila. Thank you, everyone, for your questions coming in today. We're going to be closing up the Zoom. We'll keep the Zoom open. We're going to close up the live stream right now, but just know that this remains available on our YouTube channel, and you can revisit it there. You also should stick around, as Pramila just described, and see some of the things in the space. Those of you on Zoom, we are going to leave the Zoom open, so you can stay there, and we will return for the artist showcase as well as for the workshops. So If you have any questions, comments there from Zoom, just let us know. All right, thanks everyone.